Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. If you grew up in the United States as a kid, no doubt you called shotgun at least once. You probably really didn't know what it meant other than it was going to get you the front passenger seat. But shotgun actually has a meaning. It goes back to the old Wild West. And when you called shotgun, it really meant calling shotgun, and there was a shotgun involved. Usually a double barrel, probably a Greener or something like that. This is a Rossi Overland, and the concept was you were going to ride the stagecoach, defend the stagecoach against highwaymen while the driver was going to drive. And in that scenario, you were the sole protection in most cases. Now, those days, the coach was a stagecoach. It was powered 1 to 4 horses up in front of it. We happen to be in a motor coach today. It's got 300 plus diesel ones in the back, but we figured it'd be a perfect venue to talk about this gun, the nostalgia that's associated with it, and just how cool these things are. So we're going to move to the table where we've got a little bit more room to maneuver and talk about this gun a little bit. Well, here we are with the gun out on the table. We've got a couple others out here that'll kind of come into play as I talk through this. But it's a little easier now to move around and talk about the guns. We'll talk about the specifications and a few other details of it. Briefly, let's just talk about the specifications. It has a 20-inch barrel, or actually barrels, and it has a full rib down the middle, so the barrels are solidly reinforced. They're going to stay in tune. The overall length of the gun is 37.5 inches from the tip of the rubber back butt plate all the way up to the end of the barrels. And the length of pull varies between 14 and 15 inches. 14 inch to the rear trigger, 15 inch to the front trigger. And it does have dual triggers. So if you look at the modern double barrel shotguns are still popular today. If you look at the modern ones, most of them are over under, most of them have internal hammers, and most of them have single triggers that operate sequentially. This one also has, in addition to the dual hammers. And the hammers actually function. So I'm going to put these snap caps in there. They're just dummy rounds to protect the firing pins. This is an old gun, so I don't want to damage the firing pins. In order to fire the gun, you have to cock back the hammers, and then you have to pull the triggers. The trigger weight on the front trigger is somewhere in the 9-pound territory. The back trigger is over 12 pounds. And there's a little of a difference, and I think partially it's for safety that if you're firing the front trigger and your finger slips off due to the recoil, it's harder to accidentally pull the rear trigger. But when you pull one of the triggers, the hammers actually hit the firing pin, and then they rebound. You can probably see there's a little gap between the firing pin and the hammer. And I can only push the hammer forward just a little bit, but not far enough to hit the firing pin. So that's an integral safety. At this point, the gun is drop safe, and it's safe to carry it even if it still had loaded chambers. With the hammers down, it won't auto-cock when you open it or close it. Now, of course, when safe to carry, that would assume that both hammers were down. In this particular configuration, with one of the hammers cocked, it would not be safe because it's got a loaded, it theoretically would have a loaded round in this chamber. But if both hammers were down, and there were a loaded round in the chamber, you'd be okay. Not that this is a carry gun, but in the cowboy action and some of the other shooting sports, you would be using a gun like this. In fact, these are very popular in the cowboy action. The external hammers, the heat treated, you'll see that here, and you'll see it a little bit on the hammers. It's actually just a really cool gun. It's got a Brazilian hardwood. These were made in Brazil. They were made between 74 and 88, 1974 and 1988. I don't know exactly what wood it is, but it's very, very nice wood. It's really robust and solid, and the gun is actually quite well made. It functions smoothly. This one's a little stiff. It hasn't been shot a lot, so when you release it to open the barrels, it'll be a little bit stiff. And you'll notice the rounds stick out a little bit. This does have an ejector. And then when you close it, it's ready to go again. But again, I would have to cock both hammers if I had fired both chambers. Now, one note, you wouldn't want to load live rounds in with the hammer back because that would be an unsafe condition. If you pulled the trigger at the time you were loading the live rounds trying to close it, you could accidentally fire, and you may not be pointed where you should. But of course, with snap caps, it's empty, so it's that doesn't hurt anything. But I am going to release the hammer and put it down, which I can do just by grabbing the hammer toggle and pulling the trigger. Taking the gun apart is relatively easy, and by the way, this thing weighs almost exactly 7 pounds. It's well balanced. It does recoil significantly because there's no action. There's no gas system, there's no recoil system. It's all of the recoil is on you. But this rubber butt pad does really absorb quite a bit of the recoil and makes it manageable. You can give them both barrels by pulling both triggers, And surprisingly, the recoil isn't all that much more. I guess if you're getting hit with a bat, getting hit with a slightly bigger bat really doesn't stand out as much. Before I take it apart, I'll show you some of the other operation. This lever here, pushed all the way to the right, is what allows you to open the barrels. And as I mentioned, it's a little bit stiff. And when you open the barrels, then it would eject if there were rounds in there. And then to close it, you just snap it shut. You'll notice this lever goes back to the center, and the gun is ready to operate again. If you'd loaded it, you'd cock the hammers and go to town on it. To disassemble it to maintain it, these are easy to do. There's a button up here at the front. Push that, lift this component off, and then release it like you were going to empty it, and separate the two halves. Now, when I go to put this back together, it may take me a try or two because this gun has had very little round put through it. I bought it from somebody who had bought it new and shot it only a few times, and then since then I've taken it out for some fun, but it's not something that you take out every day and shoot hundreds of rounds through. Not unless, of course, your shoulder is made out of bronze. Putting it back together, you're going to line these two hooks up here and here, and it does make it easier if you pull the takedown lever over when you do it. You line it up, which it's much easier to do if you just put it in front of you and you're not trying to do it for the camera, and put it back together. Then this piece here, push the button, line it up, push the button, drop it down, and you're back in business. Very easy to maintain. Much easier to maintain than modern semi-automatics that you got to take a bunch of screws and the magazine and tubes and springs out. But you get 2 rounds. Use them well. Reloading it is a time-consuming process. Now, of course, in the old days, they got good at reloading these things, and of course, the other guy didn't have anything much faster. Probably what the other guy would have if he didn't have a shotgun is he might have a single-action revolver, like this Ruger. And this, he had his 6 rounds, one at a time reloading. Or he might have a Derringer. Now, of course, it wouldn't have been a Bond Arms or a Ruger at the time, but it would have been something similar to these. You might have a Derringer that would have 2 rounds. Usually they were 22 or 45 or smaller, smaller rounds than this 410. But these are the types of weapons that were popular in the day, the modern equivalent of them. So you weren't necessarily dealing with somebody that was coming up on you with a Tommy gun at the same time you were trying to defend your coach with this shotgun. What you hoped for is that it was no more than 1 or 2 highwaymen, and when the first one took a round, they all decided they'd choose a different coach. From a barrel perspective, both of these appear to be modified choke. There's very little quality specifications out there on it. Both appear to be modified choke. They're 3-inch magnum chambers, and you can shoot slugs through them, but this is about the tightest choke I would shoot a slug through. And definitely only lead slugs, and I would avoid steel in this. And you'll notice it has a bead front sight and no rear sight. You're kind of just putting this in the general direction of the thing you're wanting to put rounds on. We found it easy to shoot well for range, trying to put it on the center of a zombie target, that type of thing. I wouldn't necessarily use this for duck hunting or something where I need to be a little more accurate, a little more specific, though I'm sure it's quite capable of it. This wouldn't be my first choice. Cowboy action, clays, sporting clays, things like that. This type of gun is popular for that. And you would run various different loads from buckshot to birdshot depending on what it was you were trying to do. Let me pop these snap caps back in here so we can play around with the triggers a little bit more. So if I cock both hammers, I can operate the rear trigger, does the left hammer, the front trigger does the right hammer, or if I'm really in a bad mood and I want to make somebody's day bad, I can give them both barrels and fire both rounds at the same time. And I do this in the video so you can see that that is a noticeable amount of recoil. So the way you would do that, by the way, is you grab the gun, you'd hook 2 fingers in the triggers and pull them. And depending on the timing, you can sometimes get it exact. A little bit of practice, the first round I went exact. This time I'm tilted a little bit. But you can get them pretty close to both barrels at the same time, or close enough that whatever's on the receiving end isn't going to be able to tell the difference. It's just a fun gun. Does it have a true practical purpose? Probably not. Is it something that it's worth having and enjoying? Definitely. This is the kind of thing that was real popular. It was the thing of the day. It's been supplanted by much more modern firearms, but they're just cool. You can't buy these new, of course. You'll find them used anywhere between $500 and $1,500. As a general rule, the ones I've seen when I was shopping for this in the $500 territory tended to be a little rough, rust on them and stuff like that. But if you look, this one here I stumbled across for right around $500. It's in really, really perfect condition. So if you look around, you'll be able to find one like this. They're durable, they're reliable. If they're well taken care of, they have every potential to last a very long time. And if you look at the finish, this gun's at least 30, 40 years old. Even if this was built in 1988, that would make it 30 years old. And the finishes, other than a few scratches from having been handled, the finish is still cherry on it. The bluing is nice, and the barrels inside are perfectly smooth. So they were well-manufactured guns, unlike some of the Chinese imports that are coming through these days that are significantly poorer put together. A lot of them have problems with the sears and consistency of the triggers and stuff like that. And this one just works. So overall, get yourself a nice double-barrel shotgun, and of course it has to have the fully functional hammers. The internal hammers, they work, but they're not so cool. Get yourself a single-action revolver and your Derringer. Go out and play cowboy. Have a great day. So if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell if you do, and don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you. Modern automatics are nice, but they just don't have some of the class that something like this does. Let's go down here. Just fun to have fun with on the day at the range. Loads up fairly simple. Close it, cock the hammers. See, it's got dual triggers. So in order to give it both barrels, I'm going to have to put both fingers on the triggers. And give them both barrels.